The firearms import company occupies a modest office building in a commercial district near a major port, operating as a licensed importer, bringing firearms from overseas manufacturers for distribution to dealers nationwide. The business has held federal import licenses for 18 years, maintaining a reputation for professional operations and regulatory compliance. Owner and staff attend industry trade shows, maintain relationships with foreign manufacturers, and process hundreds of import shipments annually through proper customs channels with complete documentation. The company's business model focuses on importing collectible and specialty firearms that appeal to enthusiasts seeking items not readily available from domestic manufacturers. Import paperwork shows weapons arriving from manufacturers in 7 countries, passing through customs inspection, and receiving ATF approval before distribution to licensed dealers across the United States. Financial records show a successful business with steady growth, employing 12 people and grossing several million annually through legitimate international firearms trade. What regulators don't realize is that the import documentation is systematically fraudulent. The company exploits regulatory complexity and gaps in cross-agency verification to import far more weapons than licenses authorize and to bring in prohibited items by falsifying their specifications on import forms. The operation represents massive document fraud, enabling illegal firearms trafficking through what appears to be legitimate international commerce. The paper trail looks perfect because the owner understands exactly which documents to falsify and how to make fraudulent paperwork appear legitimate to reviewers who don't cross-check details across multiple databases. The scheme began 9 years ago when the owner identified opportunities to profit from regulatory arbitrage between international firearms markets and domestic demand. Certain weapon types command premium prices in the United States due to import restrictions, domestic unavailability, creating lucrative opportunities for importers who can navigate complex regulations. The owner realized he could dramatically increase profits by importing weapons beyond his authorized quantities and by falsifying specifications to bring in items that would be denied if properly described in import applications. The owner's methods demonstrate sophisticated understanding of the regulatory framework he exploits. Import applications require detailed specifications including manufacturer, model, caliber, barrel length, and other characteristics, determining whether weapons qualify for import approval. The owner submits applications describing weapons in terms that qualify for approval, then imports different items matching those approved descriptions in documentation, but not in reality. He falsifies manufacturer certificates, alters specifications on shipping manifests, and creates fraudulent inspection reports claiming weapons match approved descriptions. The paper fraud operates at multiple levels across different agencies and documentation systems. Customs declarations describe shipment contents matching approved import permits, but the physical weapons inside containers differ from what paperwork claims. ATF Form 6 import applications describe specifications qualifying for approval, but the owner substitutes restricted items that wouldn't be approved if properly described. Financial records show payment amounts matching declared quantities and types, but the actual transactions involve larger shipments and different items generating substantially higher profits. The shipping operation demonstrates careful coordination with overseas suppliers who understand they're participating in fraudulent imports. Foreign manufacturers and intermediaries create false certificates of origin, fabricate compliance documents, and alter packaging to match fraudulent import paperwork. They ship extra weapons concealed in declared shipments, include prohibited items described as approved types on documentation, and participate in the paper fraud, enabling the scheme. The international coordination indicates sophisticated criminal organization rather than isolated domestic fraud. The scale of fraudulent imports grows dramatically over 9 years as the owner gains confidence in his methods and expands relationships with cooperative foreign suppliers. Initial fraud of occasional shipments expands to systematic falsification of nearly every import, with the owner bringing in 2 to 3 times his licensed quantity limits and regularly importing prohibited weapon types through document manipulation. Over 9 years, he fraudulently imports over 12,000 weapons beyond authorized quantities and types, generating illegal profits exceeding $8 million. The financial structure supporting the operation involves complex international payments designed to obscure the true nature of transactions. The owner maintains multiple bank accounts in different jurisdictions, uses shell companies for payments to foreign suppliers, and structures transactions to avoid reporting thresholds that trigger automated reviews. Money flows through cryptocurrency exchanges, offshore accounts, and legitimate business payments, mixed with illegal proceeds to create paper trails that appear routine to casual examination, but conceal massive fraud when analyzed comprehensively. Federal investigators first noticed the operation through data analytics, examining patterns across large data sets rather than investigating specific suspicious activities. ATF analysts conducting routine statistical analysis of import volumes identify the company as an outlier whose declared import quantities seem low relative to their domestic distribution volumes reported by dealers receiving their inventory. The discrepancy isn't dramatic enough to trigger automatic alerts, but it's consistent enough over multiple years to warrant closer examination by experienced analysts who recognize subtle indicators of potential fraud. The investigation begins with detailed review of the company's import documentation and dealer distribution records. Investigators compare weapons the company reported importing against items dealers report receiving from the company, looking for discrepancies indicating unreported imports or misrepresented items. The analysis reveals troubling patterns. Dealers received substantially more weapons than import records show entering the country, and some dealers received weapon types the company never reported importing, according to ATF Form 6 applications. Financial forensics teams analyze banking records and payment patterns to understand revenue flows. They discover the company's declared revenue from legitimate imports couldn't support the business volume that shipping records and dealer reports indicate. The owner reports importing and distributing quantities generating perhaps 3 million annually, but financial analysis suggests actual business volume closer to 11 million. The discrepancy indicates massive unreported imports that documentation fraud successfully concealed from regulatory oversight for years. Investigators expand the probe to examine the company's entire paper trail across multiple agencies and databases. They obtain customs records showing what the company declared when shipments entered the country, shipping company records documenting actual container contents and weights, foreign manufacturer sales records showing what was actually shipped, and financial institution records revealing true payment amounts. Cross-referencing these separate data sources reveals systematic discrepancies between what paperwork claims and what actually occurred at each step of the import process. The customs documentation analysis proves particularly revealing. Investigators discover the company consistently declared shipment weights and container volumes far below what shipping companies recorded receiving. The discrepancies indicate containers held substantially more weapons than customs declarations stated, meaning the company systematically underreported import quantities. When investigators compared declared weapons specifications against foreign manufacturer production records obtained through international law enforcement cooperation, they find additional discrepancies showing the company falsified weapon types to obtain approval for items that should have been denied. An undercover operation supplements the paper trail investigation. An agent poses as a dealer seeking to purchase specific weapon types in quantities suggesting illegal intent. He contacts the company, expressing interest in acquiring items that would require substantial imports, beyond what the company's licenses should authorize. The owner responds positively, eventually offering to supply quantities that couldn't possibly come from the limited imports his documentation shows. The owner grows comfortable enough to hint that his overseas connections allow him to work around certain regulatory limitations for reliable customers. The undercover agent makes several purchases over 10 weeks, receiving weapons that investigators trace back through the supply chain. Forensic analysis determines the weapons don't match any import records in ATF databases, confirming they entered the country through undocumented channels that the owner's paper fraud conceals. Each transaction adds to evidence of systematic import fraud beyond isolated violations. The recorded conversations include the owner discussing how he manages paperwork to avoid bureaucratic delays and ensure smooth processing of imports that otherwise might face questions. International cooperation proves essential for building the comprehensive case. Investigators work with law enforcement in 7 countries where the company's suppliers operate, obtaining manufacturer production records, export documentation, and financial transaction details. The international evidence reveals that foreign suppliers shipped far more weapons than the company's U.S. import documentation shows, confirming systematic underreporting. Some foreign suppliers maintain their own records, showing weapon specifications differing from what the company reported to U.S. authorities, proving deliberate falsification rather than innocent errors. Digital forensics examine the company's computer systems, recovering draft documents showing the process of creating fraudulent import applications. Investigators find files where the owner modified manufacturer specifications, altered technical descriptions to match approval criteria, and created false compliance certificates. Email communications with foreign suppliers discuss shipment quantities exceeding what import permits, authorize, and coordination of false documentation to support fraudulent customs declarations. The digital evidence provides devastating documentation of systematic intentional fraud. The investigation reveals sophisticated money laundering supporting the fraudulent imports. The owner used cryptocurrency to pay foreign suppliers for excess weapons beyond declared shipments, avoiding traditional banking systems that create permanent records linking payments to specific transactions. He structured payments through multiple shell companies and offshore accounts to obscure the sources and destinations of funds. Financial forensics eventually trace over $9 million in payments to foreign suppliers that can't be matched to any legitimate declared imports, representing the financial shadow of years of systematic fraud. Federal prosecutors coordinate with customs enforcement, international partners, and state authorities to prepare for a comprehensive operation targeting the entire fraud network. Arrest and search warrants cover the company's office, warehouse facilities, the owner's residence, foreign supplier locations in 2 countries, and domestic dealers who knowingly purchased fraudulently imported weapons. The coordination requires months of preparation to ensure simultaneous action across multiple jurisdictions and countries. The operation launches on a Wednesday morning with FBI, ATF, and customs agents executing search warrants at company facilities. Tactical teams secure locations and detain personnel before evidence can be destroyed. The office search reveals extensive documentation of the fraud, including draft import applications with falsified specifications, communications with foreign suppliers coordinating fraudulent documentation, and financial records showing millions in unreported imports. Computer seizures capture digital files that investigators spent months piecing together through data analysis. The warehouse search discovers inventory that shouldn't exist according to import records. Agents find over 3,000 weapons that company documentation shows were never imported, proving systematic underreporting of quantities. Some weapons bear specifications differing from anything the company reported importing, confirming falsification of weapon types to obtain approval for items that should have been restricted. The physical evidence validates years of data analysis indicating fraud concealed behind false paperwork. Simultaneous international operations target foreign suppliers in cooperation with authorities in 7 countries. Raids in 3 countries result in arrests of manufacturers and intermediaries who participated in creating false export documentation and shipping excess quantities concealed from U.S. authorities. International evidence seizures provide documentation confirming the scope of coordinated fraud across multiple countries and organizations. The global coordination demonstrates this was sophisticated international criminal enterprise rather than isolated domestic fraud. The owner is arrested at his residence, immediately invoking his right to counsel without making statements. Agents seize computers, financial records, and documents that supplement evidence from business locations. Some documents recovered from his home include personal notes discussing fraud methods and calculations of illegal profits, apparently kept as personal records of his criminal success. The evidence demonstrates the owner personally directed all aspects of the fraud operation over 9 years. Media coverage emphasizes the sophisticated paper fraud that concealed massive illegal imports behind apparently legitimate business operations. Stories focus on how the owner exploited regulatory complexity and inadequate cross-agency verification to systematically falsify documentation across multiple systems. The case generates discussion about whether existing oversight mechanisms adequately protect against determined fraud by importers who understand the documentation systems they're exploiting. Congressional hearings examine how the fraud continued for 9 years, despite regular inspections and documentation reviews. Agency representatives testify that the owner created paperwork so professionally prepared that it passed individual document reviews, and only comprehensive data analysis across multiple databases revealed the discrepancies indicating fraud. Lawmakers question whether agencies have adequate data analytics capabilities and whether cross-agency information sharing needs enhancement to detect sophisticated document fraud. The investigation expands to trace fraudulently imported weapons through distribution chains extending across the country. Over 60 dealers purchased from the company, most unaware they received illegally imported weapons because the documentation appeared legitimate. Some dealers knowingly participated in the fraud, purchasing quantities and types that should have raised questions. Federal agents work to identify all dealers and recover fraudulently imported weapons before they reach end users or appear at crime scenes. Trial proceedings begin 13 months after arrests. The owner faces dozens of charges, including import fraud, false statements, smuggling, money laundering, and conspiracy spanning. 9 years. Prosecutors present overwhelming evidence, including the data analytics that initially indicated fraud, falsified import documentation recovered from searches, financial records showing millions in unreported transactions, testimony from cooperating foreign suppliers, and recordings from undercover purchases. Expert witnesses explain import regulations and demonstrate how the owner systematically violated them through document falsification. The defense attempts to argue that import regulations are complex and confusing, suggesting the owner made mistakes rather than committing intentional fraud. This argument fails against evidence showing deliberate falsification of specifications, coordination with foreign suppliers to create false documentation, and the owner's own notes discussing fraud methods. The prosecution establishes that someone with 18 years of import experience clearly understood what regulations required and deliberately chose to violate them for profit. Conviction comes after a 6-week trial. Jurors find the owner guilty on all counts, determining the evidence proves systematic, intentional fraud rather than regulatory misunderstandings. The conviction validates the data analytics investigation and demonstrates that even sophisticated paper fraud eventually yields to to comprehensive cross-database analysis when investigators recognize patterns indicating potential violations. Sentencing occurs 8 weeks after conviction. Federal guidelines call for substantial prison time given the duration of fraud, the quantities of illegally imported weapons, the international scope of conspiracy, and the massive illegal profits. Prosecutors argue for maximum sentences, emphasizing that import fraud undermines national security by circumventing systems designed to control which weapons enter the country and ensure they reach only licensed, legitimate dealers. The judge sentences the owner to 26 years in federal prison. The sentence includes 18 years for fraud and smuggling charges, 6 years for money laundering, and 2 years for false statements, with some terms running concurrently. The judge also orders complete forfeiture of all property purchased with illegal proceeds, restitution to the government totaling $10 million covering unpaid import duties and fees, and lifetime prohibition from any firearms-related business activities. The harsh sentence reflects the serious nature of systematically defrauding import control systems. Foreign suppliers who cooperated with the fraud face prosecution in their respective countries under international agreements targeting weapons trafficking. Several received substantial sentences under their national laws, demonstrating international commitment to preventing coordinated fraud. The international prosecutions complement the U.S. case and send messages that weapons trafficking participants face consequences regardless of where they operate. Cooperating domestic dealers who knowingly purchased fraudulently imported weapons receive sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years, depending on their level of awareness and cooperation with investigators. Those who provided substantial assistance tracing weapons through distribution chains receive reduced sentences. All lose their licenses permanently and face prohibitions from firearms-related business. The investigation prompts comprehensive reforms in import oversight procedures. Agencies implement enhanced data analytics continuously comparing import documentation across customs, ATF, and financial databases to identify discrepancies indicating potential fraud. New regulations require more frequent physical inspections of imported shipments to verify contents match documentation. International information sharing enhances to facilitate verification of foreign manufacturer claims and export documentation. Technology implementations include blockchain-based tracking of import documentation, creating permanent records that can't be altered retroactively. Customs and ATF develop integrated databases, allowing real-time cross-checking of import applications against actual shipments and dealer distribution reports. The goal is making paper fraud, like the company employed, effectively impossible through technological safeguards that automatically detect inconsistencies across documentation sources. Industry organizations representing legitimate importers support enhanced oversight despite additional compliance costs. Professional importers recognize that fraud damages the entire industry's reputation and creates pressure for regulations affecting all businesses. Trade associations develop certification programs and best practices emphasizing transparent documentation and cooperation with verification procedures. Insurance requirements tighten for importers, with policies requiring specific compliance measures and audit procedures. 3 years after the initial arrests, federal agents continue tracing fraudulently imported weapons as they appear in investigations. Some weapons the company distributed have circulated through multiple resales before being recovered. Each recovery provides additional evidence of the fraud's scope and sometimes leads to arrests of individuals who knowingly purchased or possessed illegally imported weapons. The full inventory of fraudulently imported weapons will likely never be completely recovered. Financial recovery efforts focus on seizing assets worldwide that the owner purchased with illegal proceeds. International asset forfeiture cooperation helps identify properties, accounts, and investments in multiple countries. Recovered assets eventually total over $6 million, though substantial proceeds remain hidden in accounts and investments investigators couldn't definitively link to the illegal operation. The recovered funds get applied to restitution obligations and investigation costs. For legitimate firearms importers, the case creates increased scrutiny and compliance burdens as agencies implement enhanced oversight. Initial reaction includes frustration about additional regulations affecting honest businesses. But most importers eventually accept that sophisticated fraud, like the case revealed, necessitates stronger verification systems. The industry adapts to new normal of enhanced data analytics and cross-verification requirements. 5 years after the case, the import oversight system operates with substantially enhanced technological capabilities and interagency coordination. The data analytics systems that detected the fraud become continuous monitoring tools identifying potential violations before they accumulate over years. Cross-agency information sharing enables real-time verification of documentation consistency. The reforms make sophisticated paper fraud far more difficult and enable earlier detection when fraud is attempted. The story concludes with recognition that sophisticated document fraud can conceal massive illegal activity when criminals understand regulatory systems and exploit gaps in cross-agency verification. The import fraud case demonstrated that paper trails can be falsified systematically if oversight relies on individual document review without comprehensive data analysis across multiple sources. But once investigators recognized statistical anomalies and conducted thorough cross-database analysis, the paper fraud unraveled and overwhelming evidence emerged, leading to successful prosecution. Vigilance through continuous data analytics and cross-agency information sharing remains essential for detecting sophisticated document fraud. The importer succeeded for 9 years because each individual document appeared legitimate when reviewed separately, and only comprehensive analysis across multiple databases revealed discrepancies indicating systematic fraud. Modern technology enables such analysis routinely rather than only when suspicions arise, creating surveillance systems that detect paper fraud attempts much earlier. The work of preventing import fraud never ends, requiring constant technological enhancement and international cooperation to protect systems designed to control which weapons enter the country and ensure they reach only legitimate channels.